You are listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. Thank you for downloading and subscribing. Coming to you virtually live from high atop the historic Raleigh building in beautiful downtown Raleigh. The NCF&B takes the listener behind the scenes to tell the stories of the people that contribute to the creation of the food and beverage community of North Carolina. And now, the misfits in the dish pit, the faces of the front. They are Max Trujillo and Matthew Weiss.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss, and we are at the lovely Stardust Cellars tap room, which is, I believe, in the AVA of Brushy Ridge Mountain. Is that right?
Swan Creek.
Oh, it's the Swan Creek AVA.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I gotta brush up on my Yadkin Valley stuff.
Take that song card back.
Here, that's why we're here. So, and that is the voice of Nico Von Cosmos, the owner, winemaker, everything man for Stardust Cellars.
That's right.
Welcome, Nico.
Thank you for having me.
Well, so wait, Nico Von Cosmos, what came first, Stardust Cellars or the Cosmos?
I think the Cosmos, right?
I had an idea to have a farm and vineyard that was named after the Cosmos or Stardust, and actually changed my name to Von Cosmos because I knew I was going to do that. So I actually changed it when I was in grad school back in Washington. So I had the intention of, I got really into fermentation science and the little microbes that make everything magic, and I figured I'd change my name now because I started to kind of ideate on business names and different concepts, and that's when I kind of did it. So I actually changed my name before the business.
Yeah.
So you were all in from the beginning.
From the beginning, yeah.
And we should give a little background. So you have the only biodynamically farmed vineyard in North Carolina, and that pretty much guides your whole principle, your sustainable, biodynamic, organic, everything. I don't think you have any like carbon footprint in your area at all.
No.
I mean, maybe not even one.
No, so I have a very minimal carbon footprint. I'm looking to have it minimized even further. So this spring I'm actually getting South Down baby doll sheep so that I don't have to mow anymore because I don't want to use up, gas for mowing and all that.
I was just going to say, the man out there, his name is Sonny, right? Who is your landlord.
That's right.
And you also called him the greatest landlord ever.
He is.
Who, by the way, Max, I don't know if you saw, all of this in Stardust Cellars and Taproom is built by reclaimed wood. He's documented every piece in here and where it comes from. It's unbelievable.
Oh my gosh.
And that's the first thing I thought actually when we rolled up is like, but Sonny, that's a gas-powered mower over there.
He doesn't play by the same rules that I do.
Yeah. I bet he's using some sort of alternative fuel, like
maybe
like liberals' tears or something. Yeah, but I'm just kidding.
There's a cornfield out that way. I don't know. He could be using some biofuels or something. I don't know.
That's fantastic. Well, so, and you infiltrated this state. We found out early that you're not even from these parts. Much like myself, you come from the West Coast.
That's right, San Diego.
So born and raised in San Diego, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And then your journey
migrated
took you north?
Slightly north. So I've been up in San Francisco working in biotechnology. I worked in San Diego in biotech, worked in San Francisco in biotech. I studied biochemistry at University of California in Santa Barbara. And then I actually went up to Washington State, up in Pullman, so more of the wheat fields, not the giant mountainscape, part of Washington, to study food science, where I specialized in wine microbiology.
At some point, you made the trek to North Carolina. What was the offer? What was the attraction to come out here?
That's right. Well, so I was working in biotech for a while after getting my degree. So I was working in biotech before and after, and I kind of got disillusioned with working for biotech for so long, pharmaceuticals. I mean, it was great science and all that, but I really wanted to start something based on my graduate degree. So I was looking for land. I was looking for a place where I could really get my foot in the door. I love the West Coast, but that place is so saturated. I mean, it just you can't just walk in and start a vineyard, wherever you want to.
You really cannot.
I mean, there's no land that's available for somebody in their 30s to go and start a vineyard. It's not. You can't do it.
Yeah.
So I was looking at land that was, a good farmable land, something that was really available, large tracts of land or something that I wanted to get my hands, dirty in. And I always love the rivers, the mountains. I'm a very outdoorsman kind of guy. I love the forest. forests. And when I started looking into places outside of the West Coast, I looked at Texas, I looked at the Carolinas, I looked at Virginia, but North Carolina struck me as this place that had just, I mean, everything that I wanted. It had the perfect climate for the kind of grapes I wanted to grow. It was kind of this up and coming wine region. I mean, there's 40, 50 years of like modern contemporary grape growing here, but a lot of that traction has really started to grow in the last decade or so, and I could really see that. So doing my research, that just seemed like the proper kind of area for what I wanted to do, and I always wanted to have land that had creeks running through it and these beautiful serene landscapes, and North Carolina is just the most beautiful place I've ever been.
Wow.
So when did all this take place? How long have you had this?
This is 4 years in now.
4 years now,
I started building the winery in 2017, but I started the vineyard in 16.
And the wines you make now, are they all coming from your vineyard, or is it still too young?
Mostly none of. I mean, the only grapes that I have coming off right now, I have some red grapes, but too small to do a really big vintage, and I'm growing Traminette as well, which again is just small batch. So
is that what's in our glass now, the Traminette from your vineyard?
That's a blend of stuff from my vineyard. I also have grapes from Highland Orchards as well that's blended together, which is all Swan Creek AVA.
Okay.
And yeah, everything else has been too small batch to do a large production of labels and everything. So it's kind of it's growing slowly but surely.
Yeah, but you went off and started your project already, and you're like, So when in your mind, seeing as the meticulous person that you are, or at least I have the impression of, do you think that those vines will come online for you, where you'll be comfortable putting them into?
Yeah,
project?
Well, the thing about biodynamic grape growing is it's not it's not a very fast thing, right?
Yeah.
So I started a few years ago. I'm probably looking at like year 6 or 7 before I start really seeing a vintage that's big enough. And that's because I don't use fertilizers. I'm not throwing a bunch of nitrogen on the ground. The roots are growing at their own at their own pace. But that's going to make a much stronger, much sturdier, much more cold and disease resistant grape in the end. So I'm trying to invest what I can now. Most people that get into vineyards are, in their 60s and are like, well, I have a bunch of money and I want to start something fast and have wine before I die.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm coming into it in my 30s, like, okay, when I'm like, in 20 years, I'm going to have a great, vineyard that's really well established and everything's going to be great. So lucky for me, I am way more skilled at winemaking than I am at growing grapes.
Okay.
So my initial focus was, I'm going to make the best wine I can using grapes sourced from the local Swan Creek AVA.
Cool.
And that branched off when I got here. Once I started trying the honeys, I learned, oh my gosh, I need to be making mead, because I think I can make the best mead here, that everyone has ever made, because this is amazing. I've never seen honey like this. So
this is fascinating, man. I'm already just like, I just want to hang out with you all weekend long.
I do want to make a point that's just related that people always think, it's organic, or it's biodynamic, or it's certified sustainable, so it tastes better. Yeah. Well, that's not necessarily the reason that vineyards or winemakers or vineyard owners are doing that. They're doing it because of the healthiness, and not only the healthiness, but the longevity then of their vineyards. Because in grape growing, if you're thinking it as a business, as an agriculturally farmed product, you're getting, from the age of, let's say, 10 to 25, so 15 years of premium grape growing out of your vineyard before you start having to make decisions to replant. But when you have a biodynamic vineyard, an organically vineyard that's healthy and strong vines, you're expanding those premium years by at least 10, sometimes 20 years of grape production.
So basically, if you have the time, it will come back to you.
It will come back to you, and tenfold. Yeah.
Tenfold.
Yeah.
This is just like our Pappyland conversation we had with Wright Thompson about playing the long game, where Julian Van Winkle was like, as he said, he's putting bourbon into barrel that he will never see. He'll die before it's ready to go, but he's talking about legacy and longevity and generations and all. So I love that. I love the patience. I mean, I was just going to tell you, you could do it a different way. You could just use all those chemicals and do whatever you want, and then you could start making wine tomorrow.
Yeah, but you know, the best wines in the world come from places where the person who started the business is dead. And, you know, it's a long-term, huge project that spans generations. And that's kind of my mindset with it. Like, I'm putting that work in now. Luckily, I'm young enough where I can actually see some great results before I die. But I want something that's going to be, you know, long-term, long-lasting. I want something that in 100 years people will be like, oh yeah, Stardust Cellars, that place is awesome. It has this, this, and that. And like, things that I won't today even know will exist in 100 years.
Do you have children?
No, I don't. Not yet.
Are you working on it?
I will eventually.
All right. That'll change your perspective a little too, but maybe actually reinforce it. Like, go even deeper into it. All right, I got to get into what we're trying right here. This Chaminette is
delicious.
Like, I mean, okay. No disrespect to North Carolina winemakers, but we've tried some wines over our past that did not cut it. Just putting it, frankly. You'll know who we think are great because we've had them on the show. Jones Von Drail, not too far along from where we're at right here, and the gents over at Sanctuary, of course, our friends at Botanist and Barrel, who you know very well, and then we're excited because we're going to speak with the gent over at Raffaldini as well. That's a small handful of fantastic winemakers, and of course, there are a few others that I'm not mentioning, but just the ones that have been on our show. You can do a lot in this state with its climate and with its soil, but you got to think differently than, say, try to jam Napa Valley mentality into North Carolina. To understand, you said this was a place specifically that you wanted to grow wine. Why and what type of grapes were you trying to grow then?
Right, so I wanted to grow grapes that really brought out an element of experimentation, and I really wanted something that could showcase the microbes of the land, of the soil, like natural microbes. I wanted to showcase everything from the high minerality, the high quartz content of this region, to the heavy rainfall, which allows me to actually do a completely no irrigation vineyard, which is amazing. I mean, it's highly prolific, no irrigation.
That's not common.
No, absolutely not. And the fertility that you can get here is fantastic. The quartz in my soil is extremely high. I actually built my vineyard next door to a quarry, so very high rock concentration, lots of quartz. What the quartz does is it actually retains energy, so when the sun beats down, quartz is something that collects and retains that energy, warms up the soils, and actually helps to produce richer, more full-bodied wines that have higher alcohol content, higher sugar from the higher sugar. And so that also removes a lot of the problems in this area. What you can have commonly is so much water that waterlogs the roots. It can cause damage to the crops by, too much spoilage, like from, molds, different rotting agents, and what the quartz does is it actually breaks up those clumps of clay to allow that drainage to happen. And without that quartz, my soils would just kill. I mean, you wouldn't be able to have very good wine. And so I think that's something that's special about the Swan Creek AVA is the soils are phenomenal. I mean, the climate is great too, but the soil, the climate, everything is great. And what I have really tried to do the most of is hybrid grapes. Because these things are growing on their own rootstocks. One of the big intentions of biodynamic farming is
You're not worried about phylloxera here? No,
I'm not worried about it. It's growing on rootstocks that are very resistant to phylloxera because it's an American crossbreed, and American roots have a very high tolerance to a lot of diseases. One of them is phylloxera, and
America saved the day again.
That's right.
You're welcome, France.
What would they do without us? I have no idea.
For those that don't know what we're talking about, when phylloxera went all through France and kind of devastated all the vineyards, the only way to really fix it was to put American rootstock on there. One could also say that America was the problem because wasn't it?
We probably brought it over there.
We brought the phylloxera over to them, and they weren't ready for it. So we kind of destroyed them first, and then we built them back up.
Well, it's like World War I, where the people who actually brought the Spanish flu to Spain, we found that out after the fact. We saved the day in the World Wars, but we actually kind of caused some of the damages.
And then named it the Spanish flu. It's like, Spaniards are like, that's not us. Thanks a lot.
More talk on Americans' conspiracy theory.
We'll take a quick moment to talk about one of our favorite companies. I'm talking about Triangle Wine Company, purveyors of fine wine and craft beer. The Triangle Wine Company offers local delivery, in-store pickup, curbside service, wine shipping, and keg rental. With locations in Morrisville, Cary, Holly Springs, Southern Pines, and soon to be Raleigh, they are here to service the community for all of your beverage needs. And be sure to use the NCFB promo code to receive a nice discount when placing your orders. Visit trianglewineco.com or call them at 1-800-919-7518. This episode is also brought to you by Boss Coffee USA, Japan's #1 coffee brand, coming to you here in North Carolina. We're technically all over the Americas because it's available on Amazon.com. Coming in 3 flavors, black, vanilla, and cafe au lait, Boss Coffee is flash brewed, which means it's brewed hot and then chilled fast for optimal flavor. My personal favorite is the cafe au lait because it's so fancy and I like fancy things. Although my boy Matt over there, I think he likes to go with just the straight black coffee, which has no sugar, is keto, gluten, and dairy free. So super smooth and clean. Make sure that when you are purchasing your Boss Coffee on Amazon, you use our promo code, which is NCFB Podcast. You will receive 10% off your purchase because we like you a lot. So thank you for listening. Thank you for enjoying Boss Coffee. And now back to the show.
Okay, dude. Personally, how did you get the money for this? Because it's a big investment and not necessarily the greatest return.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. So what happened half a decade ago is my mom got alimony for my dad.
Okay.
And she wanted to figure out a way to invest it, right? So she was looking into investments. She was, had her 401k and everything going. And I, at the time, was actually studying through San Diego State University, a business of wine education. And my mom actually ended up joining me. So we were taking classes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we both took classes at San Diego State for business of wine. And this was between my undergrad and grad school.
These were just like side classes.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that last name was not Von Cosmos. So
right.
That
would be Hography was the original name, and then I changed the name when I started the business.
Yeah.
We've been talking for a long time. We both were really into wine. My dad was also really into wine. I grew up with Spanish red wines everywhere around me because my family is, my dad's side of the family has Spanish roots. So, which is actually, my grandmother grew up right next to where this wine comes from.
del Castillo.
So these grapes are actually shipped out here from Spain.
Okay.
But yeah, so I grew up with wine. Family loved wine. Got a little bit of cash, wanted to invest in it, and we kind of came up with the idea of why don't we start a vineyard, and a winery and all this.
Yeah.
I was going into grad school to learn wine microbiology. Everything was golden, and things just kind of fell into place where it just made sense to just write up a loan with the same percent interest as a bank, and instead of me getting a loan from the bank, got it from my parents. I was able to do that instead of waiting 10 to 20 years until I was able to save up enough to start a winery. So I had the education needed, just not the funds, and they were able to help me with that. And
did your mom come out here with you, or is she still in California?
She has been in California, but she's actually moving here in a few weeks. She bought a house on Kerscott Lake, which I convinced her of because it's the most beautiful lake I've ever seen. Because I love lakes where you can't build right on the water edge because it looks like it's just wild. So I get to kind of think that I'm in the tropical paradise of the old world of it's beautiful. But yeah, so I convinced her to come out here, and besides that, I was working in biotech for a long time. I saved up some cash that way, and ever since I moved here, I've been working for R.J. Reynolds in Winston-Salem. So I actually have a day job. So that's how I pay the mortgage.
R.J. Reynolds, the
massive tobacco company.
I may or may not have partaken in one of those products that you produced over the years.
Yeah. So I went from pharmaceuticals and biotech to the wild world of tobacco because I moved here, started a farm and vineyard. I'm like, I need to make some money. I'm so used to California where I'm like, I'll just get a job at the local biotech company, whatever.
What's so oddly fascinating is I don't know if I've actually, in all the years that I've lived here in North Carolina, met someone that works for a tobacco company.
Right?
Yeah. I always just talk to people like, my family was doing that, or we
had a
used
tobacco
to do that.
farm.
Yeah.
But it was over and all that.
Yeah.
And I've never really met anyone that is involved in the tobacco industry.
That's right. Yeah, I do next-gen products, things that are reducing harm from traditional products. So anything that's like fermented or anything like I've been a fermentation scientist there for a long time, or anything that's kind of going down from cigarettes down to like something that's safe or a safer product for people.
Okay, so the other thing that you mentioned about how the quartz rock, is it?
Quartz,
quartz,
right.
yeah. That makes so much sense because the red clay is ubiquitous throughout North Carolina,
That's right.
but a lot of stuff, it's really hard to grow stuff in there. Like, I know just in my own backyard, it's just hard to get stuff moving, but the quartz and what it does to break up the red clay makes so much sense. And is that what you were talking about, how it holds in the heat, kind of a la Chateauneuf de Pape?
Yeah, quartz is very famous for holding in heat. It's an energizing stone, and actually, if you look into biodynamics further, and old pagan mythology, witchcraft, whatever, quartz has always been synonymous with concentrating power, energy. And what's interesting is that old kind of mythological aspect of it really just resonates with the science behind it that I study. That really showcases it transfers energy from the sun into the ground, heats up soils. Like, this is all scientifically documented. Like,
but it makes so much sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, and that's kind of the blend of what I've always at least interpreted by biodynamic farming is that you can, and forgive me if I say something that sounds offensive when I say this, but
you probably will, just so you know.
Well, biodynamic farming always sounds really amazing and great, and it's about the sun and the culture, the environment. But then you always get some person in the wine industry that's like, it's just a bunch of hippy dippy bullshit, man.
Putting shit in the ram's horn.
Yeah, I mean, people.
Which I did see the ram's horns out there, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean,
I thought it was a shofar. By the way.
But when it's you're talking about like on the biodynamic calendar, the day that you open the bottle, is this a fruit day? Is this a mineral day and all that? And all that stuff. Of course, I've talked to the gambit of wine professionals where they totally believe in all that stuff to the other extent of it's hogwash, do whatever the hell you want, whatever. But I do, the way you're telling me, it feels more like science, which is something more palpable for me to digest. It's like, I get it, there is something to do with the moon and the stars and all that, but that is also science too, because it's just talking about its relationship, like Mother Earth's relationship to the moon and to the atmosphere. It makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just you said it in a way that makes more sense.
I was going to say, because a lot of people ask me all the time, and I give them what I think is a pretty well thought out basic answer that gives them an inkling into what biodynamic farming is. But what's your biodynamic farming 101 when you explain it?
Sure. So biodynamics is there's some basic principles. Like this is what is required to get Demeter certified or whatever, and that's one thing. The other really bigger aspect of it is the intentionality behind it. For me, the intentionality is getting the vineyard and the winery for that matter to be done in a way that really transcend like technicality. Like, you're not just following these steps, you're doing it with the intention of making the best product possible, and you're doing it with the intention of bringing every single element you can together, whether or not there's actual evidence that one tiny little thing makes a difference. So for example, it's like doing 100 things and hoping they all kind of work together to make a better product. So that's
like what venture capitalists do when they like invest in 10 brands at one time. They're like, they might not all make it, but one's going to make it. We just don't know which one it is, so we're going to invest in them all.
Right. And what's funny is you look throughout history, and isn't that really the base of all human evolution? Isn't that like the base of everything that we've done that's kind of culminated into something magical? Like, did people come out trying to make soap? No, they just discovered it. They made they burned some bodies upriver, and the ashes went down, and they mixed down below, and they created soap.
That
and everything
delicious.
Became food. It's just like
it's in the glass. It's what we're drinking.
You got to try a bunch of stuff, and eventually you'll notice things start to work in your favor. And the same is true with biodynamics. Like, you start to really increase the soil of your health by spreading microbes out. And if you study the microorganisms that start growing in there, it's like, oh yeah, that's beneficial, but is that really? I don't know. Is that doing something? If you start amending the soil with extra nutrients from the fertilizer from your animals, and you mix it with some ground up mashed up herbs. Like, originally, was that just, did everyone know that would do something, or was that just some magic that was like, oh, let's do a cool ritual? But then later on, things started working, and it's like, is that God? Is that magic? Is that like some cool thing we did that's working? I don't know, but things just started working, and what's cool is we now have gone to the point where this magic now meets science. So my background in science, I've sought my whole life to kind of explain these phenomena, and when I was in grad school, I studied a lot of terrestrial microbiology. So I really wanted to go to the Max Planck Institute, and said I started a winery, but I wrote a bunch of
terrestrial microbiology.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a very cool field.
Not to be confused with the extraterrestrial microbiology. That is a hot button right now.
But I actually do have a paper that mentions extraterrestrial biology, which is the study of microorganisms in outer space. So I actually wrote a paper in Washington that was about microorganisms that I discovered to be in wine that had never been found before in wine. And one of these species actually was scraped off the edge of the International Space System, or the station fermentation. Yeah, up in space. So some of these
Really?
bacteria in wine apparently can also survive in space, which is pretty unique.
Wow. I love it. Like, we're not microdosing right now. Like,
Yeah, it feels like we
like a
are,
Joe Rogan
especially with the
episode.
sunlight coming in right now.
But maybe it's just in your environment here. Like, you come to Stardust Cellars.
It starts hitting you. I
Yeah.
spray it through the ducts.
There you go.
Seriously, yeah. Whatever it is, give me
Yeah.
more. Actually, seriously, give me. Let's get to your next
let's move on.
wine.
Let's move on here.
You have a couple of them in here, and
Yeah.
this Tremanet we first tried
That was fantastic.
really
The
delicious.
the florality, but you still maintained the acidity, and yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
You do everything Methode Ancestral. Is that all the wines you're doing
Everything
right
except for red wine.
Okay.
Red wine is terrible Methode Ancestral. I mean, it's okay, but I love just a strong, bold red wine, and that's what makes me kind of a hypocrite. Is I buy grapes from Spain. Now it is from right next door to where my grandmother grew up, playing the castle. So this is actually dedicated to her. This is
Corazon
a
del
sketch that my
Castillo.
cousin did of her playing next to.
Where is it? Where's the region?
So this is in Mont-Saint region up north. She isn't from exactly that region, but she's from Zaragoza, but it's like right next door to her.
It's next to Priorat, East Coast, like near Barcelona, sort of.
So I'm excited to get to this one, but everything else here is ancestral method. This one I kind of had to pay homage to my family from Spain. So.
Wow. And so, and I'm sorry, we are drinking what now?
Oh, this is.
We skipped. Sorry for the listeners.
Yeah.
That was confusing. We were talking about a Spanish red, but we are not drinking that. We are having a Pinot Gris right now.
Wow,
Yeah.
from Swan Creek.
Yeah, so this is Swan Creek. This is 100% from Swan Creek Highland Orchards. These grapes, so what makes a lot of my wines unique also, the white and the rosés, everything is foot stomped and basket pressed by hand. So I
I'm
used...
tasting that bacteria right now.
yeah.
A little toasty.
You know, it brings out all the natural yeast and bacteria. It helps to really break down and extract everything without the harsh tannins you get from modern machinery. It really gives a better mouthfeel, and the color, you can tell this is a Pinot Gris, but that color is so much darker and deeper than you normally get with just pressing a Pinot Gris outright, without a little foot stomping first.
Well, so for the first two grapes, at least, the Tremanet and then the Pinot Gris, these are all variations of grapes that are like German or Alsatian kind of style. Is that were you focused on kind of that style? I mean, you were kind of saying you were coming here for certain types of grapes. This so far is leading me to think that's what you were looking at.
I love German white wine.
Yeah.
I am a huge German white wine and Spanish red wine. Those are my things. That's
okay.
I'm all about. I actually come from German and Spanish descent. But I love.
Is that a product of biogenetics? Like,
I have no
because your line is there? I mean, how far are we going to take it?
I don't know. All the way, right?
But maybe,
we're gonna
right?
go all the way tonight.
But if you're from there, I mean, I'm not kidding. Like if you are of Italian descent, do you kind of favor to want?
Predisposition to like Italian wine.
that sounds like a scientific study we have to go about doing.
It's a fact. We said it here.
Okay. You heard it first.
Well, Methode Ancestral. So the fermentation is happening in the bottle, what makes the bubbles essentially.
That's right.
And so there's a couple of ways you can do that, right? Like even though Ancestral, like you can add still wine back, and that's still considered in order to stop fermentation, or.
Yeah.
Well, how do you?
He did not.
Sorry,
you're
it was like you're
poo-pooing.
talking about Spock to a person who watches Star Trek. It's sorry.
Oh.
So, Methode Ancestral has its roots from 1531. I'm going to tell this story going from me not knowing what the heck I'm talking about to me knowing what I'm talking about. So, this all started without me having any knowledge about any of this.
Yeah.
So I was making wine in grad school in Washington in my garage. All right, it was a late harvest Riesling, and I put everything in the carboys, let it sit, overwintered. I got so busy just with graduate school work that I just let it be there. Right. So I eventually bottled it all in early March. Right.
Okay.
Now, this is northern Washington. It's cold. It drops temperatures. This late harvest meant that it actually stopped the fermentation a little early.
Yeah.
Around, let's say, 2 bricks or so.
Okay.
And I bottled it in March and then, left it all in my garage. Around April, May or so, I started hearing some just crash, smash, and okay, whatever. So I go and check it, and there's glass everywhere. And, I'm like, what on earth happened? And I open up one of the bottles, and it's the best bubbly I've ever had in my whole life. I mean, just dry, bubbly, wild, just ancestral method Riesling, and I had never known what ancestral method was in my life.
You organically discovered it.
Yeah, I did. I felt like I had this moment of I looked it up, like what happened, and I read about ancestral method, which, just nerding out as a grad student, learning about wine microbiology, figuring out what happened to my wine. I figured out that was a 1531 method from Saint-Hilaire up in the mountains of France.
Monks,
And then this style has just kind of come in and out of, I guess, public knowledge. Once method, the champagne method and all these things came along, they're so much easier to work with. But what Methode Ancestral is for me anyways, and this isn't definition Methode Ancestral, I think the current definition really kind of misses the point. And I've noticed a lot of people making Pet Nats and calling it Methode Ancestral, which kind of bothers me a little bit.
Okay.
Because the original Methode Ancestral is so much more about the seasons, that natural, like the climate that goes behind it, than it actually is just the fact that there's some, microbes in your wine, and it's making it off of primary fermentation. I'll agree, yeah, Pet Nat, okay. Yeah, Pet Nats are awesome, but the thing about my method of Methode Ancestral is it uses that same exact method of actually letting it overwinter and then come back to life. So it's really a 4-season approach. So we foot stomp and we produce the wines in the fall, and these wines go and they ferment kind of at a cooler temperature. I start off at 65 degrees, then I move it into a room that's 55 degrees. It starts to kind of cool down, it slows, it's very gentle. It keeps a lot of the volatile compounds from, like outgoing or outgassing into the air. And then in the winter, what I kind of have as my winter room, I actually have like a door that's the winter room. I pick up the tanks with a pallet jack and I move them into a cold room, and that's to mimic the winter temperatures.
Yeah.
So that actually,
and that makes the fermentation dormant.
Right. And I have to do that at the right moment exactly. Because if you do it too early, you create explosive, bottles. Yeah. If you do it too late, it's like, well, what's the point? You don't really get much fizz. So you have to get this right notch that's like right in the middle, right there. And if you hit that exact amount of bricks, you can have the perfect sparkling wine. You can have it effervescent, you can have it high bubbly, you can have it low bubbly, but you really want to kind of gauge the bricks, right at that moment.
Yeah.
But so during that winter stage, and I let it sit there for about 3 months or so, to really have, December through March, just let it sit, let it just be gentle. I don't add anything to it, there's no, flocculent materials added, none of that, that clay or whatever.
And it's a Coke bottle capping it at that point?
Yeah, so I bottle it from there. So I pull it out, I bottle it directly from those tanks, I move it into my 55-degree room to kind of wake it back up, like it's, spring is kind of coming to the season and then kind of wakes up, and then I move it into the summer room, so my fermentation room. So that's back at 65 degrees, they start warming up, they start to become bubbly, and then that's when I serve them. So you have this perfectly sparkly, refreshing thing in the middle of summer. For me, Methode Ancestral really is more about the natural seasons, and that really, I think that's more of the biodynamic principle behind it than just
that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, hold on. You're doing this in the actual months from December to... You're doing this in the winter and then in the spring.
Yep.
So it begs the question, why aren't you just letting it be in a one room where it actually does experience the natural climate? Like, we do experience a winter here and a spring, so why would you do all of that extra work moving things around? Couldn't you just put it in an environment that is of the actual temperature outside?
Yeah, hypothetically. It just, grapes come off at different times throughout the season, so...
It's to control the variable if we have a hot spike in the summer or in the winter, or a cold spike in the spring.
The downside of North Carolina, is we actually do have a very variable weather. So temperatures fluctuate, right? So if all of a sudden, like what's happening now, today it's
like 60 degrees and
middle of
sunny.
December, 65 and sunny.
Yeah, this is shorts weather. Right. Yeah, we could go in a pool right now.
So just last week it was in the 30s. It was like 39 degrees. Okay. So that's something that North Carolina is not as easy to control as it is in the mountains of, France and Belgium or northern Washington. We have very variable weather. And so that's a method that I've kind of done to have better control over everything. So I'm literally making sure that it does the, kind of correct weather that I expect it to have. But because everything's so variable here, it's just, you can't do it. I'd love to just make it all outdoors and just kind of have no winery and just do it all that way.
Yeah.
But also I couldn't get a permit for it.
I also just want to make
the next one while we're the next
I
segment?
just want to make 2 points there. So just for those of you who are listening who are like, wow, I still don't get it. What the heck is going on? So versus the difference, if you look at it in Champagne, once a finished wine is fully fermented, they add sugar to and close the bottle, so a secondary fermentation happens to make the bubbles. There's no secondary fermentation in Methode Ancestral. The wine has a high sugar content. You're stopping fermentation at some point, and then those sugars are re-fermenting within that same bottle. So there's only one fermentation still.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Do you know, or are you familiar with Nancy Ireland of Red Tail Ridge?
No.
Because she makes her. Remember when she came in and she brought a bottle? She calls it Pet Nat, but maybe that's for marketing. The term Petit Natural seems like the same thing, but she does it in the same way. And when she was here visiting us,
she's up in the Finger Lakes in New York, so she's making wine up there.
Yeah, she kept having to call her, I think, husband, because he's her partner in it, and being like, "Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet?" Because, or like, "Do we have to move it yet?" Because she was waiting for the perfect time to, put it in or move it or whatever it needed to be. But anyway, it's a kindred spirit that you should maybe get to know. I think you guys would be friends.
Yeah, she's fantastic. So, what are we drinking here now?
This is my Florence Rosé. It's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. It was made with foot stomping and basket pressing using a 35-gallon wooden Italian basket press. Took 4 days of me just ratcheting down these grapes.
That's crazy.
It actually took 14 different people in the community, different business owners and locals who all just kind of came out of the woodworks to help out because they heard this was going on and they wanted to kind of see what was happening. So we all sorted and all that. Now, this was during Hurricane Florence, so we actually had to toss 65% of our grapes. So we were taking cluster by cluster, pulling out the good grapes, putting it in one pile, the bad grapes in the other, and then having 3 or 4 people foot stomping them, and then someone would take a bucket and dump it into the Italian wooden basket press, and I would just ratchet it down. And this was 4 days.
Wow.
Yeah, we made 80 gallons of wine.
And can I just say that wine is magnificent. That well worth the labor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
These wines are tremendous.
Yeah.
It is like I'm not trying to speak ill of North Carolina, but I really didn't think that wines were possible. Like these style of wines. You know what I'm saying? Like this is a very in its classicness. If that's a word. Sure. It feel very new. Like you're doing something new. That hasn't been done, definitely in these parts, I would say, but in a lot of parts of the country and around the world, you're doing something new in really just like the oldest way possible. Yeah. But maybe because you understand the science of it, you're kind of sanding down the edges of what maybe somebody might have done 400 years ago because they didn't understand the actual method. They just knew like this is what we're supposed to do. But now you're kind of understanding why, which is possibly helping you kind of guide yourself down for a better, or a more dialed in focus of what you're trying to make.
Right.
Max, you're like reading my mind here because the next 2 questions I had written down was, 1, we're pretty much in the know in this. I mean, not always, but in Max knows
people. We know this.
Yes.
We have a good pulse on what's going on in North Carolina. Why have we not heard of you?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm getting the name out. But.
You have good labels. It's well more like do you only sell it? I mean, on a
you yourself, you're a character. Like you're an interesting person. So
do you only sell out of the tap room?
No, Or
do you have a distribution partner?
I am getting a distribution partner. Currently, I'm in talks with a couple different places, but very likely I'll be working with Artisan Beverage pretty soon here.
Okay.
And they primarily have done beer. And the cool thing about these wines is my best way to market these wines is calling it farmhouse wine or calling it, like a wild fermented, like a rustic farmhouse. I use beer terminology a lot of the time because a lot of people don't expect that effervescence or that wild fermentation. And so partnering with someone who's more used to beer drinkers, I think kind of gives me this interesting niche. And just earlier this year in March, they decided they wanted to start carrying wines. And when they found me, we kind of went back and forth and they wanted a natural wine that was North Carolina. They carry natural wine from other states. They carry a lot of wines from North Carolina that aren't natural. This kind of fits the bill for them. So I'm hoping this works out. Frankly, the last distributor I had, I won't tell you who it was, but we started yelling at each other over the phone because they wanted me to use corks in all my wines. And I told them I was not going to put, Methode Ancestral wines with a cork. I'm sorry. Like, that defeats the whole point. I'm using caps. And we got pissed off and they haven't talked to me in a year.
Well, here, hold on. Let me get real close to the microphone real quick. This is just for all you wine nerds out there in the Triangle that got those fancy places. This is the wine you want. Like, seriously. Like, it's really good. It's really, really good. I appreciate it. I want to know, what is your relationship with humidity out here? Because humidity tends to be very affecting in making wine. So how do you handle the process of dealing with humidity in North Carolina and making wine?
Well, do you mean with the vineyards itself? Or?
Well, okay, in a really dumbed down way that I like to explain it to people is like, if you're like, let's just use Napa as a good example, right? Because whatever, it's pretty generic and it's a good place to grow grapes. It's not dry, but it's also not humid at all. It's a good balance. It has that, what is it, diurnal change, am I saying that correctly, in one day where it gets cold to very hot, back to cold. And the way that I like to explain it to people is it's kind of just like a person that works out every day, that hydrates themselves properly, but wake up early, do 50 push-ups, go run 2 miles, and then go about their day, and then get a nice meal, and then sleep a long, like 10-hour sleep. And they do that every day. Well, their body, their health, their cardiovascular, their muscle tone is going to be really nice because they did really nice things to their body. Conversely, here with humidity, it kind of just, it makes it so that it's kind of warm. It's like you're under a snuggly blanket all day long if you're the grapes. And so you start to get a little flabby and you start to not work out as much and you just don't care anymore. You're just that...
Where's this going?
You're just chilling. You're not doing anything. I'm talking about the grapes. That's why it's hard to get a grape to get out of bed in the morning when it's humid and it's like it feels nice for the grape, so it doesn't open up, it doesn't stretch, it doesn't work out, it doesn't do as much as it could. And that's why I've always said, like, that's a big problem that North Carolina faces, is the humidity in grape growing, is that you don't get a grape that wants to work hard for that flavor. So does that make sense, what I'm trying to say? And have you considered that at all while you were growing the grapes, as like humidity come into a factor, and do you do anything to challenge it? Or how do you work with it?
Yeah, I mean, humidity really is a big deal for the vineyards. Winemaking is, there's a lot of cheats for that. I mean, every single room I have is temperature and humidity controlled. So it actually makes my life really easy. So
how do you do that without carbon footprint?
Well, I do use humidifiers in the different rooms, and the goal is to have solar panels kind of take care of that as a carbon footprint. But I mean, it can be said that it takes carbon to make solar panels, so we just go full circle. But you do the best you can. But
I like that philosophy.
Yeah. But as for the vineyards, I actually... ever since Hurricane Florence killed all of my Cabernet Franc and all of my Cabernet Sauvignon grapes, and I had to pull them all out, I decided then and there I would only plant hybrid grapes from then on.
Okay.
So actually had to pull all of my Cabernet out, and I replaced them all with Cayuga White. So now I actually have a Traminette section that's up in a kind of a mountainous area, about 2,000 feet elevation, and then I've got around 1,200 foot elevation. I've got a field of Cayuga White. Now, Cayuga White was developed at Cornell through a bunch of crossbreeding of American and French grapes to get you something that is as black rot resistant as possible, and that has been the bane of my existence. I've always wanted to have biodynamic farming and organic farming, and I tried as hard as I could with Italian grapes and the Spanish grapes and all these things, and frankly, black rot is immune to everything that is organic. There's nothing you can do. Try copper, try sulfates, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's immune. So since black rot is such a big issue in this area because of the high humidity, there's nothing you can do about it. Like other regions, a lot of other regions in America don't have the humidity that makes black rot what it is here. So you just simply have to plant different grapes. It's either you plant different grapes and you just work with that, or you just spray them all as much as you possibly want and just forgo the whole,
So, but this is Cabernet Sauvignon, so how did they do it?
So these guys use vineyard sprays. Yeah, so I'm not able to make...
Are they organic sprays?
Nope,
No?
not able.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no one selling organic grapes in North Carolina. So some of these wines I wasn't able to make as biodynamic, grapes. I'm able to use biodynamic principles in the winemaking.
Well, I mean, that's understandable. You're somewhat new in your business. You're not buying you're not making your own grapes yet, as we just discovered or discussed. So, yeah, I mean, you can only get what you can get if you're going to do it. So it's fine. We're going to let that pass. You're okay.
Well, listen, this is why the French came up with the term lutte raisonnette, which is basically saying, like, We don't spray if we don't need to, but if we need to, we're gonna spray because that's their business and this is how they make their money and this is their family legacy. But you're making the compromise before you even get to that point. I say compromise because I haven't had the best experiences with non-vitis vinifera or hybrid grapes, but that's not. I mean, I've been surprised by a lot of things. So
were you surprised by the Treminette?
I was, and that's I know that is a harmony. Yeah, that
we
was
used
fantastic.
the Treminette in the wine that we made.
There was a little bit of
with
Treminette.
Botanist and Barrel. We used Merlot.
Bottled up opinions.
Bottled up opinions. We did
What year was
Merlot,
that?
Treminette, and
Mourvèdre.
It was last vintage, or it was last year.
Same
That was
grapes?
that. Yeah, that was that
I think it was
Treminette.
the
That's
same
the
one.
same grapes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
No wonder why we liked it so much.
Yeah, we worked together. We actually sorted together all those grapes at the winery. So.
Oh, really?
Yep.
That's
awesome.
super cool,
And he
man.
also did work with Wooden Robots. So I actually made Wooden Robots.
He's been on the show.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome! Yeah.
Doesn't he look like a young Tom Cruise a little bit?
Yes.
Yes.
100%.
Thank you for agreeing
absolutely.
with
Yeah,
what I have to say.
Dan is definitely Tom Cruise.
Actually,
Oh my
that's a really good point. So we are here at the Stardust Cellars tap room, and you make beer as well, right? Not
Yeah,
to
I do make beer, but
jump off the thing, but I mean, you're making beer and mead and wine. Like you're just being super creative in the beverage realm.
I also do seltzers, kombucha. I make really good sauerkraut, by the way, and pretty much anything fermented. So last year it's
I
a
will
lot of
give you
kombucha.
my sauerkraut dip recipe before we get out of here.
I'm so down for that.
Yeah, for your next Super Bowl party.
Cool.
I would like to use your sauerkraut though for the dip. That would be good.
Yeah,
be cool.
I actually have my great grandfather's crock that was from originally from Germany, and then
Wow.
I've been using that to ferment my small batches. It's a little tiny one, but
Oh man, I bet
yeah,
it's delicious.
When do you sleep?
Between 10 and 6. So I actually do.
Because your iPhone tells you. I have it set now. My iPhone tells me you're getting ready for bedtime. God,
Screw you, iPhone. Don't tell me when to go to
Oh
bed.
my gosh. I do. Oh my
Between
gosh.
10 and 6. That was so perfect. I love it.
Yeah, I have to think about that. No, I've been sleeping later now. It's the winter. I sleep with the season. So in the summer I wake up early. In the winter I sleep in late. More so. But I do a lot on the road. Do a lot of thinking while I'm driving, and I don't know. It all kind of works. But I'm 100% all the time.
Yeah,
Man, that's
It's,
I applaud you, man.
Yeah.
This is really impressive.
May we try your?
This is
This is Piquet.
Oh my god, let me get you this Piquet.
Okay.
Do you guys like wild ales at all?
A wild ale, like beer wise. Yeah, wild ale. Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool, good.
Oh wow.
So, this is a very low ABV. This is just a 4% Piquet. This is done in the traditional. It's a Methode Ancestral, but I tried to kind of do something that was more historically accurate. So a lot of people do Piquets and they'll add sugar to it to kind of get that high ABV. This is just straight up, just great skins. It's just re-fermented after the same pressing as the other wine that we just had.
I mean, this nose this reminds me of Campari and like orange peels.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was
just
not
like
expecting that when I first got it. Like it's
Very
like
different.
sticking your nose in a Negroni or something. Like,
Yeah, you get so much more vegetal character from it. I mean, the color, this is a beautiful ruby color. So it's very unique. The re-fermentation really gets a lot of, like, a very different amount of bacteria and yeast than you normally get. Like, you can tell the Pinot Gris that we had originally, you could tell the wild yeasts in it were mostly in the Saccharomyces category. But this, you get like lactobacillus, you get a bunch of different, like really funky wild flavors to it from the wild bacteria. And I think a large part of it is this is actually a probiotic drink. I can't put that on the bottles because I don't want to touch the FDA.
Sure.
But this actually is a wild fermentation that, since it ends at just a 4% ABV, you actually do keep a lot of that probiotic character where you're getting all sorts of funky organisms that you don't normally see in wine.
So when your kids are sick and they need a probiotic, you give them a little bit, and it's only 4%. They go to
Charlotte
sleep.
would love
Everything
this.
everything
Yeah.
works.
But this one is almost impossible to sell to people here at the tap room. They taste it and they're like, what the heck is this? But if I actually find people who are really into wild ales or really into, technical winemaking, winemakers.
I'm gonna say this is not for someone that likes pumpkin spice lattes.
No, it's not.
It is not. I mean, it is an extreme on flavor profile.
Yeah.
But when you say vegetal, it's right there. But I mean, even actually, you know what? It's
Beets?
even more close to.
Beets?
It's beets.
Yeah.
Chinar. It reminds me more of chinar. So if people in the bartending world know what that aperitif is, it's made from artichokes. It's got that It's like a really sharp acid on the front nose.
I'll say that for anybody that tried Bottled Up Opinions, like it had some similarities to that. We definitely went there's definitely much more fruit, like more fleshy, common fruit, but there's definitely some notes of that in there, which because we wanted some funkiness to it, and it was in there as well.
But if you're doing a tasting here and you're going through the wines, you want to stretch someone's flavor profile. You don't want everything to taste the same.
Right.
And you just pushed us way further away from what we were just trying, which I applaud you for, because that's the whole point of creating a portfolio is having some dynamics. And man, you did that.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
I have to ask, when you first planted your vineyard in 2016 in Swan Creek, and we're here in Wilkes County, were people looking at you like, what the heck is this guy doing? Like, she's planting a biodynamic farm of ridiculous grapes. This guy's got microbes in the soil. Like, were they just looking at you like you had two heads, or were they welcoming?
I have so many stories of people just like, what on earth are you doing? I think my favorite is I do have a farm too, like a small, just very small farm.
Of course you do.
You know, and
where you make coffee as well. You roast coffee beans.
Don't do coffee. I leave that to Anchor.
Okay.
But I actually have so many fun experiences of people coming over and be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Like, you know, and the funniest is just this next door neighbor of mine that is a fellow farmer, and I was trying to explain how I was growing my tomatoes, and the fact that I wasn't adding fertilizer to him was just, he was so offended by that he actually came over and he dropped off a whole entire bucket of fertilizer at my doorstep and told me to start using it. And he also gave me a little bottle of 7 because I was telling him about how I was battling cutworms. And listening, he was just like, wait, I'm sorry, you planted 1,000 tomatoes and you only have 300 left because the cutworms cut them down? What is wrong with you? And it's just the funniest thing in the world.
Well, he's like, I do this for a living. I'm trying to, this is an economy for me, like you said earlier.
Hippies from California.
I mean, that's where the absurdity comes from, is just in the loss, right? Like, that's where I could see a rational human being would say, are you trying to do this to make money or not? But I appreciate, you're like, this is art to you, right? Like, you're making art.
I have a day job.
Yeah. Which reminds me, I have a question for you about that. You grow a lot of different things. Do you grow tobacco, and have you ever just like made your own house cigarette?
I actually have grown tobacco and cured it and done all this stuff. It's actually really fun. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
If we become closer friends, I would like to smoke one of your house-made cigarettes. As time moves on.
I actually grow a lot of different herbs, and like a whole spectrum of different like medicinal properties and things. So I've actually created a lot of like rolled cigarettes used out of like mullein, damiana, use skullcap, a bunch of different compounds, and actually make a lot of different herbal blends. So I actually have a small like medicinal herb garden that I like to use. I also have one that's for cooking only, and I have probably about 50
I want to sign up for your sleepaway camp. Seriously. I just want to hang out. All right, let's try your Spanish red blend that you ode to your mom.
Ode to my grandmother.
Your grandmother.
My yaya, as we call her, from Zaragoza. Yeah.
Oh, from Zaragoza.
That's right.
And what is the blend of grapes in this?
So this is going to be 42.5% Syrah, 37.5% Tempranillo, 15% Grenache, and 5% Carignan.
Okay, that's a very traditional Spanish blend.
Yeah, this is...
And this is 15.4 in alcohol.
That's
so
right.
Like,
you can't do that in Wilkes. You need some long sun hours for this. I couldn't make it. I actually tried to make a red wine, and that's what became of my Florence Rosé. When the hurricane came through and destroyed the crops before I could make a real red wine out of it and made a rosé, I decided then and there, I'm buying grapes from Spain. So
because the soil content out there is like that. Was it not schist? But it's the slate, right? It's a ton of slate, big shards of
Licorella.
Licorella. Yeah. But you're going to get a lot of drainage there. You're going to get grapes or vines that are going to have to grow really deep to hit that source, right? So with that, you're going to have really strong vines, which then produce a lot of sugar, which is why they produce a lot of alcohol in the end, right? I mean, is that kind of the simple way to put it?
So you get all that drainage allows you to have very low amounts of water. The less juice in your grapes. The less juice, the greater concentration of sugars. So when you take all those grapes together and you make wine, you get concentration of flavors and sugars that are amazing. And actually, that kind of brings me to one of the important life lessons in having a vineyard in North Carolina is chop out way more than you expect you need to. Just really drop grapes out, prune the heck out of them, because you can also get high concentration of flavors like you do in Spanish Reds. You just have to watch as 2/3 of your income just goes away. Yeah. But you can make a killer wine. Once the industry here is able to start marketing high-end wines like that, we'll be able to start doing a lot more of that. But there is a way to make good high-concentration wines. You just have to really, pack them in densely, really, cut them back. But
is this going to make you sad or happy? You kind of already alluded to this earlier, though. Like, if you never see the success of this vineyard, meaning, like, you're setting the table, and let's just say that some child that you may have someday takes over and then believes in your ethos and all. But I mean, you're already making a great product, but I could see this being like a stellar product in giving you another 25 years, and this is going to be stuff that people are raving about all around the world. But there's almost a sadness there. It's like it's going to take a while to get there.
It is.
So do you ever just sit there on the porch, rolling your cigarette and drinking your wine, going, "I'm never going to see what this potential is at someday"? Like,
I don't think he's that far away, though. I mean, he's 4 years planted. And he's gonna be able to make grapes in 6, 7. He's gonna be able to make wine from his estate in 6.
Yeah,
to
but
7.
but don't you feel like there's gonna have to be longevity in the maturation of your vines to get to the point where, like, even when it's first going, you're like, yeah, these are cool, but they're gonna be great in another 10 years.
Absolutely.
And then but then I guess I don't know, like, but with the regrafting, you're gonna have to do that at some point, I would assume. But like, if you're in Australia or whatever, some of those like Syrah grapes can be 75 years old or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
So the mother vine is 400 and something years old, and it's still making good wine.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wait, what's this?
Legitimately?
The mother vine in North Carolina, on the coast, right? You have to think about, there's grapes made with American rootstock. You don't have to regraft it or anything. You just let it kind of do its thing. And I mean, the original, Scuppernong, the mother vine, that's 400 plus years old. That no one really knows when exactly it started, but everyone says 400 years. That thing, they have a whole vineyard dedicated to making that wine.
And it still produces prolifically?
It still produces.
We don't know about this. I don't know
about the mother vine.
You have to go. Okay,
yeah.
So
Manio.
It's in Manio?
Oh, if you haven't gone, it's okay.
Okay, tell us.
I was almost this giddy when I went to Disneyland the first time. Nerd alert! First thing I did when I was in North Carolina, and I was like, oh my god, I have to see the mother vine. And I drive out there, and I get there the day that the guy who lives, this guy's house,
and we just chopped it down.
His family is living there, whatever, for X generations. He takes care of it. That day that I got there, he just finished paving this little parking section for people to come and visit. Before that, you kind of had to wander through and hope you could find it. But now it's actually open to the public. As of like 2 years ago, I think.
Wow.
And it's held up by these beautiful like wooden log structures that go. I mean, the whole thing is probably like 1/10 of a square mile, just in like this huge I mean, maybe that's too big. I don't know. My gauge of size
it's big.
It's very big. And
this feels very Avatar to me.
It's incredible.
End of the second act of Avatar. Their mother tree that the assholes are trying to chop down.
Yeah. Oh, someone sprayed Roundup on it 2 years ago. I'm gonna just take a wild guess and say Duke Energy. But they did the same to my vineyard actually at one point.
Oh my god.
They sprayed a section of it not knowing what it was, and they actually had to chop like a whole third or so of the whole vineyard the vine off, but it survived. So it's actually making a comeback now, and it's growing out. But it is beautiful. You can walk under it. And
it's 400 years old and still producing.
Grapes.
Matt,
we got to do an episode.
We got to do that.
You have to.
This
You're
reminds
gonna come with us.
Yes, I'll go.
That would be awesome.
I'll do a guided tour.
This is so cyclical, and this is the second time today I'm going to bring up religion, and I don't like to talk about religion that much on the pod.
It's the second day of Hanukkah.
It is the second day of Hanukkah, but just today I was listening to a podcast that's called PJ Library. They make all these great books of Jewish tradition and stuff like that, and I was listening with Cam, my son, and they were talking about the story of this Jewish tradition, but it's not only a Jewish tradition, of planting these trees that your generation or you will never see, but it is for your next of kin and for the traditions. And I mean, anybody planting trees probably knows that, because very rarely do you see the best of your tree in your lifetime. It'll be for your next generations. So that's a beautiful roundup.
That's beautiful. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But the good thing about winemaking, to finish on a positive note, and we still have to taste that mead, which I'm very excited about as well, but he will. I mean, you're your early 30s, mid 30s. So, I mean, by the time he's 60, he'll still be vigorous and producing wine.
You'll be hitting your stride.
Yeah.
You'll be in your prime.
Yeah.
Your vineyard will be in its prime when you are slowly decaying.
That's right.
That's good, though. That's all right.
Yeah,
and the way you're living with all this, like, probiotics and all that, healthy living, who knows?
You'll be like the mother tree.
Yeah.
The mother vine.
That's my plan.
Stay away from those cigarettes, though.
Oh, I'll be good.
Well, they're herbal refreshments. Is the mead next? Is that what?
The mead is next.
Okay,
that's
cool.
correct.
This is the first time we're trying a mead on the show, and we've talked about it. There's
First mead.
Yeah, Honey Girl Meadery out in where are they? In Carborough, Hillsborough,
Yeah,
something like that.
there's a
Durham?
meadery out there.
But we've
So-
never really talked mead before.
Yeah, so mead is made with honey, right? I mean,
Yes.
To oversimplify, that's
Mead, honey, and water. That's the gist of it. It can be as simple as you want it to be. And that's kind of the beauty of mead.
What is the alcohol content?
14%.
Okay.
Oh wow. Okay. Wow. Mead. So whenever I hear mead, I always think very old. Like I feel like there's tons of history in mead. You just think of like
Knights of the
Knights
Templar,
and Vikings, where I don't know, where does mead come from? I didn't expect you to just have the entire history.
No, if you want to
mead.
subscribe to Mead Facts, you come to the right place.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
figured that.
All right.
I figured you would have the answer.
So mead,
Please.
actually, the oldest remnants that we've found of mead is actually from 7000 BC in China.
Give or take 1,000.
Give or take 1,000, whatever. You know, what's carbon dating anyways? So I actually looked into it, and honeybees, I always just assumed they were European, because you think like, oh, European culture, like Vikings. They're actually from Indochina. Honeybees were taken over to Europe, and then Europeans brought hives to America. So Native American plants are actually not pollinated by honeybees.
First pasta and now honeybees.
Right? Isn't that wild?
We got to get to Asia.
Yeah, Asia's really cool.
That's
I
the
highly
motherland.
recommend. Recommend Asia. That is where mead actually originated. And if you look into places, actually, when I was on some travels to when I was in Nepal, there's actually these people there who will go and climb up these huge mountains, and they'll take these sticks and they'll stick them into these beehives, pull it out, and they'll use that as their honey. So like originally, beekeeping was more like a hunter-gatherer sort of thing, where you'd go up and it was kind of this treacherous thing where you'd go up and try to nab the hives, and you get the honey out and you bring it back with you, and you'd store it.
Stung 1,000 times.
You'd store it in your little bag. You know, you have your little bladder, and in your bladder, let's say you're out for 3 or 4 days, whatever, you're on your quest, you come back and it's a little bit fermented, right? Mm-hmm. That's the origins of mead. It's just these hunter-gatherers, 10,000 years ago or whatever, just storing their honey. And if you have a little water in there, let's say you're drinking water out of the bag, you put your water and your honey mixed together, there you go. That's mead at its core. It's very basic.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then you get like
this honey's making me feel funny.
It's almost like Gatorade. It's like an early version of Gatorade.
Is there electrolytes in here?
Yeah. There's actually, what's really crazy, and the funny thing is North Carolina actually has the same kind of plants. Rhododendron actually is a toxic alkaloid. It has toxic alkaloids in it, right? So there's actually certain areas where you can collect honey, and it has so much of these toxins, it actually becomes a strong hallucinogen. And that's actually like one of the oldest psychedelics, was actually originally just a honey that was wild collected from these rhododendron plants, and they make a little tiny batch of like mead wine, and drink it, and that was like this shamanic thing that they used to do back in the day, and they've been doing, that's thousands of years old as well.
Okay, I'm trying this right now. Why am I getting
Starting to see third eyes and stuff.
No. Why am I getting like maize or a tamale?
Yeah.
It tastes like a tamale, right?
Yeah.
Like it's that blue corn tamale type of thing happening. Why am I getting that? Is that because the could it have been that the honeybees did something with corn? Like were they
Buckwheat.
Buckwheat.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you're getting the buckwheat out of it. So this is actually four different honeys mixed together. You've got sourwood, you've got a buckwheat honey, you have a clover, and you have a general just wildflower kind of mix. But the buckwheat is actually about 50%. It's a dark honey. It's dark. Actually, your honeys actually range from a light to a dark, and generally with the seasons you go from lighter to a darker. And that's because in later seasons you get kind of the grains that are darker, like the buckwheat honeys. And yeah, the flavor complexity just all over the place when it comes down to honey. And this is honey and water. And the way I make my meads is it's not like unique or anything, but the larger producers don't do it. I use cold water and cold honey. And let me tell you, stirring those things together is a multi-day process.
That's got to get some forearm.
Dude, I was going to say,
Yes.
your forearms just be like, yeah. It's a good golfer's workout.
Oh yeah, I've got an assistant winemaker that joined with me a couple months ago, and I put him on the job recently, and it's oh my god,
He like can't lift the glass anymore because his forearms are so sore.
I love it. Welcome to the trade, man.
This is the shit task we get to do.
Yeah,
That's all right.
but yeah, it's straight up just raw honey. So it's fermented cool the whole time. It is ancestral method, so I started off cool, and then I move it to the cold room just the same way as I do my wines. So it's I call it ancestral mead. That's just my my logo for it. Now mead is crazy because labeling is like it was handed off to the wine people to try and figure out how to name things, but like there's no technical AVAs. There's no real. I mean, the naming schemes. It gets rejected every other time. They're like, you should call it honey wine. I'm like, I'm not calling this honey wine.
Yeah.
And it's just. Nobody really knows what to do with mead, so they give it to the wine people to deal with instead of the beer people. And it's like, why? It's pretty much beer, and it's like somewhere in between.
And you have bottled it. Just you can't. We'll show you pictures, but it's in what you would see like a beer bottle, like
it's just
a Corona
simple,
bottle, but
small, clear. Yeah, like a
But
Corona.
14% in this tiny bottle, like
yeah.
for the kids out there, you
Yeah.
can get crunked on this thing.
Yeah,
Like seriously, like that's 4 beers in one bottle.
that's right.
Yeah, that's a lot going on right
That's
there.
right.
Holy cow! Who does your artwork, by the way?
Yeah, so the artwork is done by Right Global Graphics. So they are pretty local. They're about hour and a half from here. So
It's beautiful stuff, and that's on all your labels. You're working with them.
Yeah, I'm working with them.
There's a great style to it, a lot of geometry and less is more type of mentality on that, which I love.
Thank you.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. What is the application for mead? Like, beer is in a very general sense refreshing, and wine is to go with food, and so like
Liquors to
like get
relax.
Yeah, like
whatever.
where's the time and place for drinking mead?
I'd like to say all the time.
Okay. No, I mean,
Mead really is an all-day sort of adventure. I like to think of on Viking ships where you just have a giant tankard of mead and you're just kind of pouring out of it slowly throughout the day. This is my throughout the day kind of drinking mead. I know it's 14%, but you kind of gain a tolerance when you get into mead.
Yeah.
That's what you tell your doctor.
Yeah. But yeah,
do you ferment out all the sugars in mead as well?
Yeah, most of the sugars. So honey is mostly fermentable. There's a small amount of unfermentable sugars. You can never get as dry of mead as you can with a wine. There's always going to be honey characteristics that are left in it that kind of sweeten it.
Which isn't a bad thing. I would almost say, wouldn't you also want to, couldn't you also just add honey at the end too? Would that be would that be bad to do? But
a lot of people do.
yeah, I mean,
Most
if you
of them
just
do.
wanted to add a little honey to the end just to give it more of a honey flavor that's not fermenting in it, but
Yeah, you definitely can. And this one right here, the ancestral method I let it wake back up and actually slow it down when it's almost fully dry, I guess. So it's really trial and error. But as you can see, it's a little cloudy because actually these bottles are from a fresh batch that I have going. And it's actually still fermenting in the bottle. So these aren't quite done yet.
Yeah.
But the flavor is so so good that I went ahead and bottled it because cloudy or not, it's so good.
They're still fermenting in our bellies.
Yeah, they are.
Probiotic.
Yeah.
One last thing. So in it's okay to ferment in these bottles. It doesn't break the pressure doesn't break the bottle.
Depends on the amount of sugar that you have going on.
Okay.
Buyer beware.
Yeah, buyer beware. Don't put it in a hot room for too long.
Okay.
No, I've tested it and these actually are good.
Yeah.
I've been using these 900-gram bottles for the most part for everything. Since these are small enough, like there's not as much pressure as you would with like a big fermentation going on in these. But so far I had no problem. I've done a lot of testing to make sure before I sold them to the public. But these don't explode at the pressures that I use.
Let's as we're kind of closing it down right here. Important things to know. One, you already said you're working on a distributor or you're starting to work with somebody.
Yeah.
When it comes to production, like how much are you making of this stuff? So could somebody buy it not just once, but could they actually rebuy it again the second time type of thing? Like, I assume these are small production, like all your wines.
Yeah.
But what are we looking at? Like, what's one bottle's run of production?
Yeah, so I generally, my ideal size to make the perfect batch of mead is a 230-gallon tank. So I use egg-shaped fermenters. It allows the temperature dispersion to be as perfect as possible so you don't have hot spots and cold spots. Any bigger, and that system doesn't really work as well. Mm-hmm. So I've kind of found this perfect egg-shaped fermenter that really works for what I'm doing. So every single batch I do is a 230-gallon batch. I put 55 gallons of honey into it. After I rack it, it becomes more like 200 gallons at finished product. So I make effectively 200 gallons of finished product at a time.
That's a fairly large amount. What about for the wines, though? Like, what about your different labels of your wines? Like, if I was looking at your Florence or your Pinot Gris.
Sure. The Rosé we only sold in the tap room because there are only 4 cases left.
Okay.
The Pinot Gris Piquette, I've got 200 gallons lying around. The Corazon del Castillo I actually ship out. I made 2,000 gallons of that one. And then the Traminette I make every year. I just do a 230 gallon batch of it, and once it really picks up, it's like I'm still kind of this is like my first or second year of really starting to move product outside of the tap room. So I'm kind of like waiting to see what catches and then making more of that. So we're kind of I have a bunch of inventory, but it's not a lot of inventory. But it's more than I need right now, and seeing how it catches on. It just trying to sell wines on my own has been extremely difficult because A, no one wants to try North Carolina wines, B, no one wants to try natural wines. It's kind of like this small little subset of people who are, my biggest clients are winemakers and brewers.
Yeah.
Like they love what I do.
Well, I will say this. I think you're false in saying no one wants to try these wines. I think there's a huge subset of wine nerds, wine geeks, but there's a lot of them.
They're out
and
there.
there are more of them every day. And it's because you start developing a more sophisticated palate and you grow tired of the generic buttery Chardonnays in life, and you just those don't scratch that itch any longer. And I think there's a lot that you can do here. I'm fascinated to know that we're kind of getting to see what you're doing, not in your infancy stage, but you're clearly just at the beginning of what you're about to do.
Yeah.
And this is remarkable, man. I am more than blown away about all of the stuff that you've provided. And I look forward, I'm sure Matt and I both, as the years are going to go on, to be like, we got to get the next vintage of what Stardust Cellars is doing. This is really cool. I will you will get the NCF and bump right now.
I was going to say, you better make sure that inventory is tight.
Yeah, well, that was it. Is like if we want to buy this stuff, like not we, but like the royal we of restaurateurs in, say, Charlotte or the Triangle, people are looking to bring this on to their restaurants when they reopen and do all that. Right now, are we just contacting Stardust Cellars directly?
Contact me directly, and I'm kind of in the middle of a few different distributors, so just contact me directly, and we'll be able to work things out.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is, like you said, mind blowing, and for everybody that's looking to have a wildly intellectual and fantastic experience, go get yourself some Stardust Cellars. You will drink very merrily.
And before we get out of here, I want to speak to you about Proof Alcohol Ice Cream. That's right, think differently about your dessert, because now in a new year, they brought back an old favorite. I'm talking about their bourbon chocolate cherry ice cream. First released last year, they brought it back again for the second time because it's so delicious. Made daily in Columbia, South Carolina. Look for the red pints and coolers at Lowe's Foods, Total Wine, Harris Teeter, and of course, Triangle Wine Company. Find out more information, go to proofalcoholicecream.com or visit any of their 200 retail locations across the Carolinas and Florida.
Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.